buttercup, you're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
Wow, some of you sent in some pretty wild news articles.
Yeah, these are intense.
A Tesla Cybertruck exploding in Vegas on New Year's Day.
In front of the Trump Hotel, no less?
Yeah, talk about starting the year with a bang.
I mean, literally.
So this Fox News article is calling it a potential terrorist attack. What do you think?
Well, it's definitely suspicious.
Very sure.
But it is a developing story. As of, well, right now, January 1st, 2025, there's a lot we still don't know.
That's why we're here.
Right, for a deep dive to try and unpack it all.
Exactly. We've got this Fox News piece, some tweets from Elon Musk himself.
And a whole lot of questions.
Okay, so where do we even begin? Maybe with a timeline. What happened, when, and where?
Sure. So first we have to talk about what happened earlier that day in New Orleans.
Oh, right.
A pickup truck with an ISIS flag drove into a crowd.
On Bourbon Street.
Yeah. It was awful. 10 people were killed and a lot more were injured.
God, that's just horrible.
And that was all before the Cybertruck explosion in Vegas, which happened just a few hours later.
So around 8:40 a.m.?
Right, 8:40 in the morning, a Tesla Cybertruck explodes right in front of the Trump International Hotel. 1 person dead, 7 injured.
Jeez. Okay, so 2 horrific events, same day.
Both involving trucks.
And then the police in Vegas start investigating the explosion as a possible act of terrorism. I mean, it's hard not to connect the dots.
Yeah, especially with the heightened security measures already in place after the New Orleans attack. Like, the police in Vegas were even searching for secondary devices.
Secondary devices. Can you remind me what those are?
Oh, sure. They're explosives that are set up to detonate after the initial attack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they go off while first responders are on the scene, trying to cause even more chaos and damage.
Yeah.
That the police were looking for them shows how seriously they were taking the possibility of a coordinated terrorist attack.
Right, of course. It's chilling, really.
It definitely adds another layer to this whole thing.
So then there's Elon Musk, right? He jumps on Twitter almost immediately.
I know, right? I mean, he's usually pretty active online, but he seemed especially riled up about this.
Yeah, his tweet said something like, "The whole Tesla senior team is investigating this matter right now. We'll post more information as soon as we learn anything. We've never seen anything like this."
It's interesting, right?
Totally. Like you'd expect someone like Elon Musk, you know, with all his resources and technology to have a handle on things. But he seemed genuinely confused, like this was completely out of left field.
It does make you wonder what that says about Tesla's understanding of their vehicles if something like this can happen. And they're just as surprised as the rest of us.
Totally.
But he did post an update later in the day, saying, "We have now confirmed that the explosion was caused by very large fireworks and a ROM carried in the bed of the rented Cybertruck and is unrelated to the vehicle itself. All vehicle telemetry was positive at the time of the explosion." So it seems like it wasn't a malfunction with the Cybertruck.
Okay, so not the car's fault, but very large fireworks or a bomb. Where did those come from?
Well, and here's where things get even more interesting. Both the Cybertruck in Vegas and the pickup truck in New Orleans were rented using Turo.
Oh, right. Turo, that peer-to-peer car rental app.
Exactly. Yeah, I know it's popular, but renting a car from another person through an app, it does make you think about security, especially now.
Yeah, for sure. I've always stuck with traditional rental companies.
Right. You go in, they check your license, your credit card, the whole 9 yards.
But with these app-based services, who knows what their background checks are like?
And could someone with, let's say, not so good intentions be using these platforms to get vehicles anonymously? It's definitely something investigators will have to look into.
Okay, so we've got 2 incidents, both involving rented trucks. One, we know, had an ISIS flag. The other, a Tesla blowing up outside a Trump hotel.
Right.
Is there a connection? Was this a coordinated attack?
This Fox News article we're looking at quotes Paul Merrow, a former NYPD officer who now works for Fox News. He says that he can't recall 2 terrorist events happening on the same day that weren't coordinated.
Wow. But he also says it's early and they need to investigate everything, right?
Right, exactly. It's a puzzle. And we're missing a lot of pieces. But even with so much uncertainty, one thing's for sure. This Cybertruck explosion has gotten everyone talking about security.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean for all of us in a world where technology is changing so fast?
And that's a really good question.
And it's one we're going to dig into right after this.
Yeah, it makes you think, doesn't it? Like all these new technologies, they're supposed to make our lives easier. But what about the risks?
Right. It's all about convenience these days. But are we sacrificing safety in the process?
Like with Turo, renting a car from some random person through an app, it's super convenient, but...
But do you really know who you're renting from?
Yeah, I mean, I assume they do some kind of background checks, but is it enough?
And that's where someone like this Paul Morrow guy, the former NYPD officer, he has some interesting insights.
Yeah, he said something about it being rare for 2 terrorist attacks to happen on the same day without being coordinated.
Right, and he specifically pointed out the use of rented vehicles in both cases.
Especially from a peer-to-peer service like Turo, it can't just be a coincidence, right?
Well, it's too early to say for sure, but it's a definite red flag for investigators. It's a pattern they have to look into.
So what can we do about it? I mean, how do we improve security without making these services totally unusable?
Some experts are talking about stricter identity verification, maybe even background checks for all renters, no matter what platform they use.
Wouldn't that be kind of an invasion of privacy, though?
It's a tricky balance, for sure. Security versus privacy. But maybe there's a way to use technology itself to make things more secure without being too intrusive.
Okay, how?
Well, what about something like blockchain technology to verify identities,
Blockchain. For rental cars. I don't really see how that would work.
So imagine a tamper-proof digital record of everyone who rents a vehicle, right? Their driver's license, any background checks, their rental history, all on the blockchain.
And that would make it harder to fake an identity.
Exactly, because it's decentralized.
Ah.
No single point of failure for hackers to exploit.
Interesting. But could something like that actually be implemented, I mean, like on a large scale?
It would take a lot of collaboration. Governments, tech companies, rental platforms, everyone would have to get on board.
It sounds complicated.
It is. But the point is, we need to start thinking outside the box. We can't keep doing things the same way and expect things to magically get better.
Yeah, it's a new world out there, isn't it? Physical and digital lines are blurring more and more every day, and we're going to have to adapt.
Absolutely. And it's not just about renting cars, right? Think about all the other ways technology is changing security.
Self-driving cars, drones, AI.
It can feel overwhelming for sure. Like we're just along for the ride. But we can't forget that technology is a tool.
It's up to us to decide how we use it and how it shapes our lives.
Exactly. We have a responsibility to make sure these technologies are used responsibly.
But how do we do that?
Well, it starts with asking the tough questions. How do we protect ourselves from those who would misuse it? How do we balance security and privacy in a world where data is everything?
Big questions, not easy answers.
But at least we're having the conversation.
That's true. Awareness is the first step, right?
Definitely. Staying informed, being engaged, thinking critically about all this stuff. That's how we can make informed decisions about how we use technology and what kind of future we want to build.
That's a great point. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to our listeners. How does all this connect to their everyday lives?
I like that. Because it's easy to get lost in the big picture stuff and forget about the individual. We'll dive into that right after the break.
It's been pretty heavy stuff, blockchain, AI, self-driving cars. It's a lot to process. But what can our listeners actually do with all this information?
All right, we've got to bring it back down to earth a bit. Because it's easy to feel overwhelmed, even powerless, when you hear about events like this Cybertruck explosion. But there are things you can do to feel more prepared, more in control.
Okay, like what?
Well, first of all, something as simple as being aware of your surroundings.
You mean like paying attention to where I am and who's around me?
Exactly. It's called situational awareness. Sounds basic, but it's amazing how many people just walk around with their heads down, totally oblivious.
Yeah, guilty as charged sometimes.
But try to make a conscious effort to observe your environment. If you're in a public place, know where the exits are. And most importantly, trust your gut.
Oh, you mean like if something feels off?
Exactly. Sometimes your intuition picks up on things your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. Don't dismiss that feeling.
So, be aware, be observant. Got it. What else?
Think about the tech you use every day. Those apps, those services, do you really understand how they work? Their security protocols. Take a few minutes to look at your privacy settings. Make sure you're okay with what information you're sharing.
I hate reading those privacy policies. They're so long and confusing.
I know, right? But it's worth it because we hear about data breaches and identity theft all the time. It's a good reminder to be proactive about protecting our personal information.
Makes sense.
And it's not just about data, it's about information in general. We're bombarded with news and opinions these days, especially on social media. It's hard to know what's real anymore.
Yeah, everyone's an expert these days. It's easy to get caught up in the hype.
Exactly. So you got to develop those critical thinking skills. Don't just accept everything you read at face value.
So be a little more skeptical, you're saying.
I think healthy skepticism is essential. It doesn't mean being cynical, but it means thinking for yourself. Question your assumptions. Look for multiple perspectives. Learn how to spot bias and misinformation.
Okay, I can get behind that. So, if we were to boil all this down to a few key takeaways for our listeners, what would they be?
Well, first, be aware of your surroundings. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Second, be mindful of the technology you use. Understand the risks and take steps to protect your information. And finally, think critically. Don't just accept things blindly. Question everything.
It sounds like you're giving our listeners homework.
Maybe a little, but it's important stuff.
It is. It's about taking control, right? Not letting ourselves be passive consumers of information or technology.
Exactly. And even though this story about the Cybertruck is still developing, the themes we've talked about, security, technology, individual responsibility, they're not going away.
This explosion, no matter what the investigation finds, it's a wake-up call. A reminder that we live in a world where anything can happen.
Absolutely. But we're not helpless. By being aware, by being prepared, and by thinking critically, we can face these challenges head-on.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So until next time, folks, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get